Hey, everybody, and welcome to yet another Terror Time Tea. This is, of course, pre recorded. Those of you that were just on the stream or that maybe have watched it on the replay for the second episode of Open the Gates, the films of Lucio Fulci, you'll say, hey, Dave's got the same shirt on. Yeah, that's because I'm doing this after doing that. I wanted to make sure, excuse me, wanted to make sure I got another Terror Time tea out. I know that I didn't do it on Friday and I didn't do it Saturday and I didn't do it Sunday, but bless my heart, I'm doing it now. So I was going to talk about some Fulci films, but I thought that might be overkill because I'm covering so many Fulci related films and Fulci films just in general for Fulci Fall programming. So I thought I'll just mix it up a little bit and I will do some Halloween um, seasonal type, maybe not necessarily Halloween films, but ones that I like to watch. Halloween. And I think I may have remembered what me and Candace talked about as far as Friday Foolish. It may have been to talk about movies that we watch around the Halloween season that may not necessarily have anything to do with Halloween. I'm going to have to get back together with Candace on that, though, just to be on the safe side. But the two movies I'm going to talk about tonight for Terror Time Tea are Dark Knight the Scarecrow, which does have a little bit of a Halloween element to it, and Trilogy of Terror, which does not, but is one that I always love watching around the Halloween season, the fall season, directed by Mr. Dan Curtis. And I'm going to talk about that one in a little bit, but I want to kick this off with talking about Dark Knight of the Scarecrow. Just give me just 1 second here. And just so you know, I don't think too much of Dark Knight the Scarecrow 2, which was done by the same director or was written by the same writer, J.D. Feigelson. And J.D. Feigelson might have actually directed it too. I'd have to look that up. I can't believe this didn't get higher on IMDb, but that's beside the point. But Dark Knight the Scarecrow was a made-for-TV movie. Came out in 1981. Is an hour and 36 minutes without the commercials. And it stars Charles Durning, Robert Lyons, Claude Earl Jones. Tanya Crow plays the young Mary Lee Williams. Lane Smith is also in this. Larry Drake as Bubba. Jocelyn Brando plays his mother. So we have a lot of recognizable names in this film. And J.D. Feigelson, who is also the writer, plays Ludi or Luddy. He's a voice on the CB radio. He's uncredited, but he is in there. And I would just like to start off this by saying that, in my opinion, this is one of the best made-for-TV horror films that I've ever seen. And, most of the time made-for-TV stuff doesn't really look that special or unique on Blu-ray. This movie does, in my opinion. So we have Larry Drake playing Bubba Ritter, a mentally disabled young man who is misunderstood by most of the town. His mother, of course, accepts him. Mary Lee, a young girl in town, accepts him and plays with him because he's like a child. Um, but unfortunately, Bubba and Mary Lee are playing one day, and they, decide to uh, play around this house that has a very vicious dog in the fence. And something ends up in that yard that Mary Lee's gonna, go after. And Bubba tries to tell her, he doesn't think it's a good idea. Unfortunately, poor Mary Lee is mauled by the dog in the yard. And Bubba tries to bring her to get some help. And he brings her to her mother and father's house. And the first thing he says, that's all he can get out, is Bubba didn't do it. And the mother screams. So when you're first watching this movie, you may think Mary Lee is dead at that point because she's very limp in Bubba's arms. And so some of the guys in the town, uh, led by Otis Hazelrig, played by Charles Durning in one of his more unsavory roles as the mail carrier. He heads up a group of men in the town, and they set out to, basically a lynch mob to kill Bubba because they think, and frankly, they're just looking for an excuse to get revenge and do something terrible to Bubba because they don't like him. So they see their opportunity. Mrs. Ritter sends Bubba. She tells him, she doesn't say where she's sending him. She said, "Remember what we did last time when you had to hide?" And Bubba, no, he understands. And we're led to believe that Bubba goes and dresses as a scarecrow and positions himself out in the fields, and he's shot and killed. But evidently, Bubba's not quite ready to die, and Bubba wants to get his revenge. So, in very creepy fashion, this living dead scarecrow seeks out and gets revenge on the men that killed him. And the movie, for a made for TV movie, there are some very creepy, eerie shots in this film. The music is very eerie. The sound effects are very eerie. And I just absolutely love watching this, and it never fails to give me chills in a few of the scenes in this film. If you have not seen Dark Knight of the Scarecrow, I would highly, highly recommend this one. Vincent Price said marvelous. I was terrified. This version that I have on Blu-ray is the 30th anniversary edition put out by VCI Entertainment in 2011, and that's been a few years. So, like I said, this originally broadcast on television in 1981 as a made for TV movie. I actually remembered watching this, when it was in syndication. Of course, I wasn't that old in 1981. I was born in 76. So I definitely didn't watch it in 1981 as I did in Halloween 2 and things like that. All those things that came out in 1981, I did not get to watch them in 1981. But this one, would reemerge on TV. It would reemerge on channels, cable and satellite channels like TBS and others, that would show commercials and stuff like that. Um, but a very, very well made TV movie. and very convincing, very effective. The way it was filmed, and it's one of those things that just makes me scratch my head when the same writer or director will put out another film many years later, like they did with Dark Knight of the Scarecrow, and you watch it and it's just absolutely horrible, and you're like, what happened here? How could they make this fantastic movie years and years and years ago and then put out a second one and it's just god awful? But I think that's one of those things we'll never be able to answer. I know I won't. Um, but I'm going to go ahead and give a rating for this one, and I got to give it 5 deadites out of 5. Dark Knight of the Scarecrow hits all the horror bases. Just you can literally forget that it was a made for TV movie. It's that well made, right? We've all seen those made for TV movies that they look like a made for TV movie. I feel like Dark Knight of the Scarecrow seems very cinematic instead of a made for TV movie. And if you don't believe me, I urge you to seek this one out. Um, don't run out and buy it, of course, just because Dana says it's fantastic. Because you may watch it and you may think, well, I don't know what the big deal is about this movie. But if you can find it for free on YouTube or Tubi, or can borrow it from a friend or a family member, I say go for it. And then, like I always say with these movies, if you find yourself thinking, hey, this might be something I will watch again or again and again and again, then you could think about purchasing it. But don't just go totally on what I say and say, oh, I'm going to go out and buy it just because Dan says it's great. No, bad idea. You never want to do that just because somebody says a movie's fantastic. You got to make up your own mind about it. I'm just here to give you information, and then you can take that information and decide if you want to find a for free version of this or any other movie I talk about on here. So that is Dark Knight of the Scarecrow. Um, the next one, as I said, is Trilogy of Terror, starring Miss Karen Black. There was a Trilogy of Terror 2 in 1996, and while it's not completely horrible, I would just rather stick with the original Trilogy of Terror from 1975. This was also a made for TV movie. I didn't realize I picked two made for TV movies. This one was actually filmed very well as well. And although it doesn't quite look as cinematic as Dark Knight of the Scarecrow, it's still very effective. It's directed by Dan Curtis. It has 3 horror stories, all of which star Karen Black, one of which she's playing a dual role in, playing 4 tormented women. Robert Burton is also in this, George Gaines, John Carlin. Gregory Harrison is in um, a small part at the end of the first story. Karen Black plays Julie, Millicent, Therese, and Amelia. Tracy Curtis, Dan Curtis's daughter, I believe, plays the young Tracy. And Robert Burton, he plays Chad in the first story. These are the 3 stories are based on stories by William Nolan and Richard Matheson. William Nolan wrote the teleplay for Julie. Richard Matheson wrote the story of Julie. And William Nolan did the teleplay for the segment Millicent and Therese. Richard Matheson actually did the story And Richard Matheson also wrote the segment Amelia, and he wrote the short story Prey that the segment Amelia is based on. So let's just go through these stories real quick here. So the first story, Julie, is about a college professor. I believe it's a college professor who um, teaches an English class. And you see Chad and his friend looking at all the girls. Are sitting outside the college and they're watching the girls come in. And Chad all of a sudden says, have you ever seen so many dogs in one place? And his friend says, the trouble with you, Chad, is you're just too spoiled. And he says, yeah, that's right, isn't it? So we see Karen Black as Julie walking up to the college, and Chad gets this funny look on his face, and all of a sudden he says, wonder what she looks like under all those clothes. This is going to come into play later. And his friend says, who, Eldridge? And, he said, oh, you don't want to mess with teachers. And, and and Chad's like, oh, I didn't know that. But Chad's sort of like a jerky kind of character. You don't like him from the first moment you see him, or I did. And I don't think you're supposed to. And so it appears that Chad has the upper hand during the majority of this story, because he gets Julie to go out to the drive-in with him to see a vampire picture. And at first she tries to say, we can't date each other and all that, we can't. Why would you want to go out with me? You have all these lovely co-eds to pick from. And he's like, I prefer mature women. And so she does end up going to the drive-in with him, and he drugs her root beer. And you think all of this is fully his idea, all right? So if you haven't seen this, if you don't want to hear what I'm going to say, you may want to step away for a little bit, because I'm kind of going to give away these stories here. So if you have not seen these or seen this movie, Trilogy of Terror, and I'll show y'all what this drink is in just a second. And you think that you might. If you've already seen it, then it's, fine to continue listening to me. But if you have not and you think that you might want to watch this, please, put this on pause, turn it off, whatever, go and watch it and then come back. It's sometimes it's like those commentaries and stuff they do for Blu-rays and 4Ks and DVDs before that. They would tell you, now we're going to spoil some things, so if you haven't seen the movie, don't watch this first. Sometimes they say that with the featurettes and stuff like that too. But forewarning, okay? I'm giving you a warning here. So he drugs her root beer at the drive-in. She passes out, or appears to pass out. He takes her to a motel, and we're led to believe that he takes pictures of her and then has sex with her. And so then he has these pictures to blackmail her with. And he tells people, he says, I don't think you want anybody to see these. So if you don't want anybody to see these, and I've got the negatives, you can keep the pictures. If you don't want anybody to see these, you will do exactly what I ask you to do. And so he appears to have Julie under his thumb. He brings her a note in class and then just goes back to his seat. He brings a book up to her desk, lays it on the desk. He's got a note inside it. And she seems very fragile. Julie seems very fragile during these times. and seems to be very affected by what Chad is doing. And she reads the note silently. She doesn't read it out loud to the class. And it basically says, "You are to come to my apartment right after class. There are some friends that I want you to meet." And so he just, like I said, it appears that Chad has the upper hand. He always has had the upper hand. And then in the final scenes, we see Julie looking very fragile at first, pouring Chad a drink, giving Chad the drink, and he's turned on the record player and she turns it off. And he says, "Hey, I want that on." And she says, "Well, I want it off." And her whole demeanor has changed. And he says, "Well, since when does anything that you want matter?" And she says, "Since right now, this second." And he says something to the effect of, "What are you talking about?" And she says, "You see, I'm bored. When I'm bored, it's over, you know." And she says, "It's over." And he says, "Nothing is over until I say it is." So um, he's like, "Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about." And she explains a little bit about being bored. And you notice all the while he's been sipping his drink. And he starts, spasming and acting like he's choking and stuff. And she explains the symptoms, mild paralysis and all that. And then death or cardiac arrest, as she puts it. And he says, "You've drugged me." And she says, "No, dear, I've killed you." And he tries to leap up off the couch and get to her, and he dies. And then she drags his body into he does photography, and she basically sets all the chemicals on fire and burns up the pictures and the negatives and stuff that he had of her, and basically destroys any evidence and burns him up in the fire. The next thing we see is Julie staring down like she's very, very sad about this article about Chad dying in a fire. And her roommate says, "He was one of your best students, wasn't he?" And she's got her Kleenex and she's sniffling and stuff like that. But we, as the watchers of the story, know that she ain't sorry. She killed him. She did it on purpose. And she had also told Chad, she said, "From the moment that you had that overwhelming desire to see what I look like under all those clothes, your mind was not your own." So we're led to believe that Julie must be some kind of witch or something that can, control men's minds and stuff like that. So her roommate says, "Are you sure you don't want me to stay home from work and stay with you?" She says, "No, Anne, go on. And then after Anne leaves and shuts the door, we see a little thin smile go across Julie's face. And we see that she cuts the article out of the newspaper and she has a scrapbook of other young men that she has murdered. And then we hear a knock at the door. She closes the scrapbook, puts it away quickly, and opens the door to find another young man there asking for help. He wants to be tutored. And you can almost guess that this guy is going to be Arthur, played by Gregory Harrison, is going to be her next victim. So that's the Julie story. The middle story is Millicent and Therese, or Therese and Millicent, I forget exactly. And I just read that all. But y'all probably think, good Lord, Dana, how How forgetful are you? So we see Millicent first, and Millicent and Therese um, are both played by Karen Black. And we see Millicent talking about her sister Therese. She's watching some old family films like Super 8 type stuff on a projector. And she's talking about how her sister ended up when they got older seducing their father, and that the mother died and they said it was suicide, but she says she knows Therese killed their mother. And the father has just died, and she says Therese is out cavorting with one of her men friends, and she says, and father not barely cold in his casket. And Millicent has asked Mr. Anmar to come over. And Mr. Anmar is a friend or a lover or a little bit of both of Teresa's. And she tells Mr. Anmar, she's like, she says, Teresa's evil. My sister is evil. Her soul is damned. She's into Satanism. She's into voodoo. She's into witchcraft. She's into all of this stuff. Um, and he doesn't believe her, and he thinks she's full of crap and thinks she needs help. And then she shares a little bit of information with him that makes him, oh my gosh, she does know. And he cries, and then he's like, she told you that? And she said, yes. She gloated over it. And so then he leaves, and we find out that Therese, when she comes home and finds out that Millicent talked to Mr. Anmar, that she gets really angry, and she tears apart Millicent's room and all that. And Therese does a lot of other things. Tracy Curtis's character has a little doll, and Millicent comes out of the house, and she says, she asks the little girl what's wrong, and she says, it's your sister, Miss Millicent. I hate her. She broke my doll. She said I was making too much noise, and she threw my doll down on the ground, and she broke it, and there's a big hole in the doll's head. And Millicent says that when she goes back to town, she will buy the little girl another dolly. And so Millicent also calls George Gaines's character. He's like the family doctor. He's known the family for years. And she says, I need to talk to you about Therese. Therese is getting, she's terrible. She's doing these awful, terrible things. And George Gaines' character says, Dr. Ramsey, he says, Millie, I thought, you were going to handle Therese. And we're not sure exactly what's going on at this point, but Dr. Ramsey tells Millicent that he will come by tomorrow, and because he has another, a home visit to make, and it's nearby, and he'll just stop by. Well, when he gets there, he finds Therese there, and Therese, tries to seduce him and stuff, and he's not having any of it. And she gets angry with him, and she says, well, leave, Ramsey. We don't need you anymore. And so he does leave. And then we see in a few other scenes, Millicent discovers that there's just no way to fix the problem with Therese unless she kills Therese. And she decides that she's going to kill Therese by making a voodoo doll using some of Teresa's hair and her nail clippings, some buttons off of one of her dresses, and all this. And so she decides that she's going to do that. And then we switch to Dr. Ramsey, and Dr. Ramsey is worried. And I think he tries to call Millicent and he doesn't get an answer. He goes to the house, he knocks on the door, nobody answers. And he finds an open door. He goes in and he's saying, Millie, Millie's, hollering for her. And he goes upstairs, and in one of the bedrooms, he finds Therese dead, but Millicent is nowhere to be found. And so he calls, the ambulance to come get the body, and he finds the voodoo doll. He knows what's happened, and he hides the voodoo doll, and he tells him, he says, cause of death unknown. And so when the ambulance drivers, the paramedics, come to get the body, Dr. Ramsey stops him, and he says, I was the family physician, a friend of the family for years. And he takes the blonde wig off, and we see that it's Millicent. He wipes the makeup off of her, and he says, the most advanced case of dual personality disorder I've ever seen. And he says, I think her name was Therese Millicent Lorimore. And so we discover now why there was only one body, for one thing, and why they never showed Millicent and Therese in the same room. We didn't see them talking to each other face to face or anything like that, because they were literally the same woman. So, but the coup de grace to this trilogy is the Amelia segment. And again, Karen Black stars in this. It's kind of a one-woman show because she talks to a couple people on the phone, but it is her in her apartment with a Zuni fetish doll. And I'm going to get to that here in a second. But I promised y'all I'd tell y'all what this drink is. I don't know if anybody cares or not, but I did get me some stuff from Outback Steakhouse. And one of the things that they had was an Aussie Jawsy alcoholic drink. And that's what this is. It's like a fruity drink. And you actually get the little shark in it. And I'm going to rinse the shark off and I'm going to keep it. But this is my cup because I got this. This is to go booze or booze to go or whatever. But these are really, really good. And it actually has some red. You can't really see it. You can see the blue here. Some red grenadine, I believe, to pour in this. I guess it's supposed to look like blood. I guess if you got these at the restaurant, they would be, you would see a little more of the red because you would have ice cubes in here and it would actually go over the ice cubes and stuff. But if you have an Outback Steakhouse near you and you drink alcoholic drinks, this one would be a good one to get. So, back to the Amelia segment. So we see Amelia coming to her apartment building. We figure out later on that this was a sublet apartment. And she's subletting it for a short time. And I think she teaches at a college and she's met a man there. I think his name might be Arthur too. Just like the guy at the end of the Julie episode. So she's met a man named Arthur, who's a professor of anthropology at the college. And she has been dating him evidently, and she has said that they'll spend the night together, and she's gotten him a present because he teaches anthropology. She picked up a Zuni fetish doll. And I have wanted one of these Zuni fetish dolls forever and ever and ever. Um, but they were put out several years ago. And now, basically, the only place you can get them is on eBay, and I haven't found any of them any less than $300. That's the reality of it. However, my good friend Candace, that I do the Friday Foolish show with, is going to make me one. And so I'm going to have my own original, unique Zuni fetish doll here before long. Um, so I'm really excited about that. Um, so anyway, she's got him this Zuni fetish doll, and it comes with a scroll, and it has this little gold chain around its waist, and he carries a little spear, and the scroll says that should that chain come undone or get lost or whatever, the soul that's supposed to be there's supposed to be a soul of a Zuni warrior inside this doll. And if the chain comes off for whatever reason, then the Zuni warrior's spirit will be allowed to be free. Okay. So she sets it on the table, leaves the room, and then we see the chain drop off. And we're like, oh boy, something bad's going to happen now. This is my favorite story of them all. I liked them all, but this one was the absolute best. And the scene at the end is pretty chilling, and I'm going to get to that. So, evidently, Amelia has a very difficult relationship with her mother. And her mother and her would, I guess, spend Fridays together, Friday evenings together. But Arthur's supposed to come over, and they're supposed to spend the night together, and she's going to give him his gift. She's going to fix him some steak and all that. It's just going to be a nice evening in. But she's got to call her mother and say, "Hey, Mom, I'm sorry, but we're not going to be able to have our Friday. We can do this next Friday." Oh, excuse me, guys and gals. So, um, her mother's giving her a hard time, and you can just tell, they go back and forth and stuff like that. And you can't even really hear, the people on the other end of the phone. That's why I say this is a one woman show, basically, with Karen Black at the center of this story. So her mother ends up hanging up on her, and she's like, well, she's upset. Apparently she's really upset. This is evidently something that's been happening between her and her mother for a long time, probably since she was a kid. And so um, she she goes and she takes a bath or a shower, and or she's getting ready to, maybe. And she calls Arthur. She feels bad about doing that to her mother. And evidently Arthur is trying hard to understand, but he's also telling Amelia, you have had every right to move out. You have every right to do whatever you want with your evenings. All right. So I think Arthur was pretty disappointed, and although he didn't hang up on her, I think it it left a space between them. Not that it couldn't have been repaired had the story ended differently, but you knew there was tension there. So she goes back into the living room and she does not see the Zuni fetish doll on the table. And she's like, "Where'd you go? Did you roll off on the floor?" And she's like feeling around. She feels under the couch and stuff. And this always reminded me, I don't know if the makers of Child's Play saw this at one time or another. Maybe it inspired them a little bit. But she's feeling under the couch and she gets poked by the spear and she says, "Well, I found part of you." Um, and then out of the corner of her eye, she sees something that looks like a little bitty, like it's running. And eventually she figures out that the Zuni fetish doll is alive and it attacks her numerous times. She's running away from it. I mean, this is just absolutely fantastic. And I think if they didn't have somebody, uh, an actress of the caliber of Karen Black, that this would have fell flat. Karen Black is who sells this story, because it could have went one of two ways. It could have went the way it did, which was a fantastic and chilling little story, or it could have come off being very silly. And I think Karen Black really saved this from being silly. Okay. So she manages to get the Zuni doll in the oven, and you think, well, maybe she's burned it up. Maybe it's gone. But apparently, the spirit must, its soul must leave, or its spirit must leave. And you see her open the oven, and she screams, and then the next scene you see, she appears very calm and she's calling her mother and she says, "I've decided that we should spend the evening together, Mom, and I can spend another time with Arthur, and it's fine." And before she hangs up, she says, "I'll be waiting for you." And she hangs up the phone. And sorry, I heard my birds. I thought it was something else. And she goes and she squats on the floor and she's still in her bathrobe and her hair's very wild and she's got a butcher knife and she starts stabbing it on the floor and she looks up at the camera and she smiles, and when she smiles she's got very razor sharp teeth, about like this, and she looks just like that damn Zuni fetish doll. And if you think that that's not chilling, I urge you to watch this. Again, do not go out and buy it. Try to find a for free copy first, okay? YouTube, Tubi. Try to borrow it from a friend or family member, okay? Then, if you decide, hey, I love this. This is something that I'm going to watch more than just this one time. Then you can think about purchasing it. I had to purchase it when it came out on Blu-ray because I just absolutely love this film. And so, once again, you guys and gals are going to get so tired of seeing me do the 5 deadites out of 5. But I got to give this one 5 deadites out of 5 as well. And so I guess that's it for me. I know I was so enamored of Trilogy of Terror, I had to talk about it so long. But I went on about 45 minutes and even showed y'all my drink I was drinking. But I guess that is it for me for tonight. This will be the last video or stream or anything I do tonight. I'm going to get me some rest. I'm going to have me a salad and I'm going to watch some Halloween like movies or related movies. And then I'm going to call it a night and get some rest. And hopefully I will feel much, much better in the morning. I mean, I already feel better, but I want to feel, 100% when I got to work tomorrow. But I want to thank all of you that tuned in to watch this, even though it wasn't live. I enjoyed talking about both of these movies, as I enjoy doing all of these Terror Time teas. This wasn't a special one for me because some of these movies I'm able to get really animated about. And some people might think that's a little silly, but that's okay. But again, I want to thank everybody for watching this on the replay once I get it up on YouTube. And I will see everybody next time.